Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Top of Off podcast. And we're going to be looking at day one of the third test between England and the West Indies. So this is the deciding test in the series, and it is really big for both teams involved, because whoever wins this test basically wins the series. And if the test is drawn, then the West Indies win the series. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And I think our viewers will be able to see that I am dressed in a red hoodie, and now our listeners are aware of that fact. And and the reason that I am dressed in red is because day one at Old Trafford of this third test was Red for Ruth Day, which is a day set up by the Ruth Strauss Foundation, which is set up by Sir Andrew Strauss in memory of his wife Ruth, who passed away from cancer. And what they do is it's an organisation that provides support to other people who are going through cancer and all the trials that gives. And the colour theme of that day is red. So everyone yesterday on day one had red caps. Sir Andrew Strauss had a red suit, all this sort of stuff, and they raised quite a lot of money. So last year when they did the Ruth Strauss Day, they raised about £280,000 or something like that for cancer charities. So it does raise money, and in our description for today's videos we will put a link in for where you can go and donate to the charity, because it's really good work. But yeah, brilliant stuff.
It's a really worthwhile cause. It helps people, first of all, people who have cancer, but also its big focus is the families of people who have cancer, particularly what Ruth died of, which was non-smoking related lung cancer, and really focusing on pre-bereavement and post-bereavement counselling for the families of people who are unfortunate enough to kind of randomly contract this horrible disease. I do support this. I am wearing red trousers. I promise. My pajama bottoms are red. I won't traumatize our YouTube viewers with that fact. It's just that if you create the Venn diagram of things I own and things that are red, the overlap is shockingly small. So I am wearing some pieces of red to support this, but they're not quite visible on the YouTube thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really worthwhile cause. We'll, as Pav says, put a link in the description. Please, it was Ruth Strauss Day yesterday, and I think the whole test, their numbers and stuff are going to be red. But the donation isn't over. Please keep donating, and yeah, really good cause. So
Yeah,
let's do it, guys.
definitely. Right, let's get cracking. So I'll do an overview of the day as we usually do, and then we'll get into our talking points. But yes, so day one of the third test was a day of two halves for both sides. The West Indies started strongly and then lost control a bit towards the end of the day, and England started poorly and gained a bit of control and gained a bit of traction towards the end of the day. So it was a day of two halves. England were put into bat by Jason Holder, who won the toss, fancying the bowling conditions under a overcast Old Trafford sky. Dom Sibley fell after 5 balls, and England were 1 for 1. No surprise there.
They've started calling him Feast or Famine Sibley. He either gets a 300 ball 100 or he gets a duck.
Brilliant. But yes, England were 1 for 1 after the first over, as Sibley fell LBW to Kemar Roach. And then it was Joe Root's turn to fall at 47 when England were on 47. So England got to 47 for 2 on a horrendous run out. And we will talk more about that afterwards. It was absolutely baffling what happened there. And he was run out there by Roston Chase. Rory Burns, who was the who was England's opener, made his 50 and really anchored that England innings. But he too fell later in the day. And Ben Stokes, surprisingly, only made 20 before he was bowled by Kemar Roach on a ball that sort of bounced a bit more than he was expecting and took the gap between his defence, and just took his middle stump. But, that was a very surprising. And when he fell, England were 92 for 3. So, England 3 down before 100 once again. Burns then, as I said, fell on when England were on 122. So England reached 122 for 4 after 47 overs. And then Pope and Buttler really helped England in the second half of the day gain control from a West Indies bowling lineup that was tiring out very quickly. Pope ended the day on 91 not out, and Buttler really sort of proved himself and applied himself this innings and ended the day on 56 not out. So they begin day 2 with England on 258 for 4 and in quite a strong position after their century stand. The West Indies have a lot of work to do to really save this game and gain the upper hand again. So yeah, very, very interesting performance from both England and the West Indies. And like I said, really it is a day of two halves. The West Indies start very well and then lose control, and England start poorly, losing wickets, and then gain a bit of control through their batting.
Yeah, it was an odd one. The all too familiar top order collapse. I mean, we say top order collapse, but if we look at the very top of the order, it seems now that England's openers are kind of alternating slightly in that one of them will last through the next 3 or 4 wickets, and then the other one will get a very low score, be the first wicket or something. So it seems like that's actually almost a good thing, because now it's not both of England's openers are getting dismissed really quickly. One always does a bit of a job. So they're quite a reliable pairing, Burns and Sibley. Sibley's wicket was a confusing one.
Although I'd say that sort of every England wicket yesterday, except for Rory Burns, was quite confusing.
I'm going to disagree. I think Sibley's was confusing in that he was bowled very well, but he was meant to. He's strong off his legs. That's his thing. He plays into the leg side very well, and he just missed a straight one. He just missed it. Yeah. Played all around it. It's his strong area, and he missed. But I suppose it happens sometimes. So pretty plum LBW didn't bother to review because what was the point?
Yeah.
I'm gonna disagree with you in that they were surprising on Stokes's wicket. Okay. Because you said it bounced a bit more than you expected and took the gap between his bat and pad. Quite frankly, a bus could have taken the gap between his bat and pad. It was vast. He played across it. It just was a poor shot on a pitch, and it jagged back, and it was a very, very poor shot. He played the line of the ball, but when it moved, he just had no defence effectively. So it was quite a poor shot, but he can't be expected to do it every time.
Yeah, I mean he's more than proven himself this series.
Ben Stokes has proven himself. I think we can.
Well, that's an understatement, really.
Ben Stokes has excelled. Then Burns, another weird one in that he's renowned for having a very good cut shot, and twice in this series off Roston Chase, he's tried to cut him and just top edged it to slip. Fantastic catch by Rakeem the Dream Cornwall.
It's brilliant. That was great. We'll actually come on to that later on as well.
Yeah, for our viewers or listeners who don't know Rakeem the Dream, this is a West Indian off spinner who is 6'6" and 22 stone.
He holds the record for heaviest man to play international cricket. Brilliant.
He's around 130 kilos for our metric cousins. He is a large man, and a fantastic slip catcher, and actually a very good off-spin bowler. But yeah, the wickets for England were interesting. Then Pope played fantastically. He looked in good touch, but struggled for a score in this series, and now he, fingers crossed, kiss of death as usual, looks like he could be on for a century. Play starts. We're recording this on the morning of day 2, and play starts in about half an hour, so I may regret that soon. when he
Well,
gets a
we'll see
first
what
ball.
happens.
Also, Josh Buttler has made me eat significant quantities of humble pie.
Mm.
Um, in
Is this the bit where I say I told you so?
Yes, in the last pod and the pod before, I talked about how he's probably got to go. He's been given one too many chances. He can't really make a score for England anymore. He's only got one century. When was the last time he made a 50? Comes on, makes an excellent 50. Very nice pace, couple of sixes in it. And also could go on to 100, or I won't say he
Yeah.
will, but yeah, I look like a bit of an idiot.
And I said, what did I say? I said one more chance. He needs one more chance. And look what's
Well,
happened.
I think that's what the selectors did as well,
Yeah,
because the comments they made when asked about him suggested, well, I believe they said he was definitely safe for this series, and
yeah,
they kind of left it open about who would be the keeper in the Pakistan series. But I think if Buttler can back this up today, and with the strong second innings performance, if we get to a second innings because of the rain and everything,
yeah,
um, then I think he might just be safe.
yeah,
Although I certainly wouldn't be opposed to just trying Ben Folks out, give Buttler a bit of a rest. But if
yeah.
he's getting on a bit of a hot streak, then
Then keep
I look
going.
like a fool.
But I think it's an interesting question to ask. In that, do we think that the reason that Buttler is performing in this test is because suddenly there is that real pressure on him, and suddenly there is that real question about where is his place in this side, and he's realised that, and his performance now sort of mentally is giving him something more to use, and that's now reflected in his performance.
Well, that pressure's been there for a while, but I think this really was his last chance. I think if he'd come out and got 10, and then something small or under 50 in the second innings, yeah, he would have been struggling to keep his place for the next test, because he just hasn't been backing it up with the bat. If he can have a strong game here, I think it may just get him that next chance in the Pakistan series to go, okay, you've stayed at execution for a little bit. If you can back this up now in the next game, we'll stick with you. Because the pressure was really on today. We've seen that a few times with England players, actually. When Sibley kind of first came into the team, he seemed to be a bit of a Joe Denley type. He could make a pretty 20 or 30, and then he'd just get out somehow. He'd find a way. And then he made that first century, and now, people are starting to say, oh, we have this problem with openers. We can't really afford to give them too many chances. And then he came in, made his century, and now we've seen that he's kind of continuing his history of scoring big runs at every level he plays at, and he's a fantastic player. So yeah, I think Butler's safe for now.
Yeah, for
But
now, as long as he, I mean, if he gets a century this innings, if it's a really big if, or even if he doesn't get a century this innings, but he managed to make 30, 40, 50 in the next in the second innings if we get there, and then obviously his wicket keeping is fine as well. So if he
he's exceptional. I think he hadn't until this test. He hadn't dropped a catch in 2 years.
Yeah, he's really good. And I think if he managed to do all of those things this game, then he'll be fine for the Pakistan series, I think. And then obviously going forward, because when we're in India, I don't think he's actually ever been tested in the subcontinent. So it'd be interesting to see what the selection decision is there.
And Folks is meant to be quite good in the subcontinent, isn't he?
Yeah. But that's another question for later on for us to think about.
Well, that could be our question to our viewers for the day. Who do you think should play in the Pakistan series and then in the India series in January? Buttler or Folks, or any other candidate you might have? Bring back Bairstow, maybe. Tweet us at the hashtag TOOpod. Send in your answers to our social media. Hashtag Bring Back Bairstow can start trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
Even though he shouldn't be brought back. But yeah, please tweet us.
Oh yeah, please do, because we've not been getting much, and
we're desperate.
We feel very lonely. Right. So we spoke about Buttler and Pope. Ollie Pope's has done really well this game as well, and he's sort of shown the promise that was there. He's shown that he can back that up with performance. Joe Root, let's talk about Joe Root.
Well, he loves a run out, doesn't he? Joe Root loves a run out. Usually Joe Root is the one strapping on his his apron and his chef's hat and barbecuing tail enders up the other end, with horrendous runouts. I was watching a highlight this morning, actually waiting for you to get ready to do this podcast, of, you remember the Ireland Test match?
Yeah.
The one we played horrendously in. And I think, who was it?
I think it was highest ever Test score.
I think it was Joe Denley that Root absolutely grilled. But they'd almost crossed. Like, Root took 2 or 3 steps out of his crease. Denley must have been 15 yards down the pitch, and Root calls no. and Denley has to turn around, and he's out of his ground by about 5 yards. It's gone straight to, it's gone straight to kind of just between short leg and wherever the next fielder, a very short fielder, square leg. Sorry, it's pretty much gone straight to square leg. He's about 10 yards from the stumps, and Denley gets more than halfway down the track and is sent back. So Joe Root, he does like a run out, but I don't actually think it was that bad a run. I think they could have taken a cheeky single. It was just fantastic fielding from Ruston Chase.
Because it wasn't even about it wasn't about their running between the wickets was poor, because they got there very quickly. It was just Chase was. I mean, had Chase not got the direct hit, it wouldn't have. He wouldn't have been out. Root, he would have.
He only just got the direct hit.
Yeah.
Like it only trimmed a bail and dislodged it. But Root looked in, and everyone thought he was in until it was sent upstairs. But I think it was immense skill from Chase turning. He's running away from the stumps. He was off balance, and just to turn and get it in and trim the bail was immensely either lucky or skillful. But, Joe Root he's not struggling for form, I'd say, as such. He looks all right. He's just struggling for a score, and he's never going to be in a position where he kind of needs a score like Buttler did. He's never going to be in that position where he needs a score to kind of save his place. He's already kind of going to go down as an all-time great England batsman. As we saw in New Zealand, he can still go. He got a double 100 in New Zealand, and that was only last year. So, he's not going to miss out.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also the other thing to say is that he's not even 30 yet. I think he's 29 or something. So he's got a long time left in his career. And I think obviously the captaincy, we've spoken about this before, but the captaincy's had an effect on him. I would like
at 3 where he doesn't like, and where he averages less.
Yeah. I would like to see him get a score this summer at some point, and I'm sure he will. He will get one at some point. But it's definitely not the same Joe Root who we saw in 2014, 2015 before the captaincy, where he made he looked. I mean, he still looks really good. It's just the scores aren't there to back him up. But let's hope that. I mean, this is just as they say, form is temporary, class is permanent, and his class is pretty permanent. He is really good as a player. He's going to.
And he likes Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
So I think he scored a double 100 against them, didn't he? So he does like Pakistan in England, and I think I'd expect him to get a pretty decent score in the next test. Not next test, sorry, next series. I think he's probably owed by the gods. He's owed a century at least. And I think he can, as you say, he's a fantastic player. He's definitely still capable of doing it. So I don't think we have to worry too much about Joe Root. He still makes, decent scores, and I think he's owed a big one. And it's just a case of, as England fans, we want to see one of our great batsmen fulfilling his potential and doing what we know he can do. And I think yeah, he can definitely have that form again. And I think he will.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with you there. It's just obviously there's been so many comparisons made between him, Coley, Steve Smith, and Kane Williamson. You know, they were the four of this generation that were really promising. And I think the other three, Coley and Steve Smith, especially when he did have the captaincy, that it didn't look like as much of a sort of weight on them as it does on Joe Root. But obviously,
well, it was clearly a bit of a weight on Steve Smith.
Oh yes.
Cracked under the pressure.
That's true. That's true. But you know, when
tampering.
In terms of their performance on the pitch, in terms of the scores that they made, it didn't look like as much of a weight on them in their playing performance as it does on Rooty. But maybe that's just because of the culture that goes around the England team and the way that the media is in England.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I think though, but actually, if you look at those batsmen, you know, Kane Williamson is probably the most overlooked of the four, and he is making consistently good scores. But Steve Smith, yes, he's always been absolute class, but you know, he's been around a while, and this last Ashes series to now probably been one of his best years.
Yeah.
You know, especially that Ashes series, no one could get him out, and he was making pretty much 100 every game, and then he actually hasn't had many big scores since then. Coley, for the last year, I think, hasn't had like a load of significantly big scores. I'm not entirely sure. So it comes in peaks and troughs. Ben Stokes, you know, he's been around almost as long as Joe Root, hasn't he? And this was really his breakout year and 6 months. You know, he's never played this well, and so he's 28, 29, and going back even further, I think it was Graham Gooch had his best average between the age of the 31 and 40.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying Root's going to play till he's 40, but there's a long way to go for him, and I think he's still got. He's one of those players who he'll have a year. I think there'll be a year where, in the next 5 years there will be a year which is his year and where he really climbs the rankings and
definitely
is on fire. And I think everyone gets that at some point. And those great players.
Yeah, they did. It's true. They all had years where they didn't perform, and they all had years where they were the best in the world. I mean, Brian Lara had that. He had that sort of the start of his career and the end of his career was spectacular, and he had a little bit of a dip in the middle. But he bookended it with these two amazing periods, where he broke records, and it's the same with any great player.
Alistair Cook, for example, the beginning of his career was spectacular. Then in the middle, it wasn't as spectacular, and then towards the end, he got better, and then had a bit of a problem, and then and actually once he was relieved of the captaincy in his when Joe Root took over, Cook really came back a lot. He did really well. So I think there's definitely time for Root.
Oh, there is. Yeah, for sure.
I did have a question I wanted to ask you, which isn't on our talking points. What do we think of this being the last England West Indian series, which will be played for the Wisden Trophy? It's now becoming the Richards Botham Trophy.
I think that this is a very, very good idea. I mean, the Wisden Trophy. There's been talk about this for a while. It's a nice name, but it's not really significant. There isn't. If you think of, obviously the Ashes is an iconic series, but if you think of other iconic series between Test nations, you've got the Australia-India series is the Border Gavaskar Trophy, named after two great players. So you've got all these sort of other series, Test series across the world, which commemorate key parts of the sort of rivalry or the history between the two teams. So to have this named after two of probably the most influential and iconic players, in that sort of amazing period of West Indian dominance is brilliant, and also just the other sort of the other sort of subtext of that, which is that Viv Richards and Ian Botham have that great friendship that comes from their time playing together. So it's going to be it's a great move, and it's going to be really interesting to see the next time they play in the Caribbean, just to see them compete for the Richard Botham Trophy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If we just look at the history of it, Wisden, I think he was called John Wisden, maybe.
Yeah.
Wisden was a county cricketer who started the now famous Wisden's Cricketers' Almanac in 1863. The trophy between the England and the West Indies was named after him and the almanac on the 100th anniversary of its inception in 1963. And I don't think he even ever played for England. He certainly never played in an England-West Indian series, and he had absolutely no bearing on it whatsoever. So I think it's a fantastic thing to commemorate two of the all-time greats of their nations and of the series. Inarguably in Viv Richards and Ian Botham, they both produce spectacular performances. And it's a lot more significant. And the fact that, as you say, they're great friends off the field, and it came from playing against each other in that particular series. Yeah, it's a much better name for it. It's a much better name.
Oh yeah, definitely, I agree. And there was actually an article written by Michael Atherton in the Times a few weeks ago, where he said we should change this. Why is it called the Wisden Trophy? Let's change it to something else. And then really funny, but he posted he reposted the article in the Announcer News yesterday, and he said, "See, it only took them 2 weeks to listen to me," or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
right, should we talk about the teams? We haven't talked about selection yet. It was an odd day.
It was very odd. It was. I mean, we were quite mystified because our sort of we both made very different selections when we said, what would our ideal team be. But also we expected, we still expected something, and we had an idea of what the team would look like for both sides. And then they didn't look anything like that. It was really, really odd. I mean, in England's case, I suppose they had to favour more bowlers, and they had to have a very bowler-heavy team because Stokes isn't going to be bowling any time in this game. He's just going to be batting. But also at the same time, what that does is that comes at the expense of your that comes at the expense of your batting order, but also it comes at the expense of Zach Crawley. And I do feel sorry for Zach Crawley that he's really been left out of this, and he's not really done much to warrant being left out.
Yeah, it was a really odd one. I'm just getting the scorecard up so I can just read out the teams quickly so everyone kind of knows what's going on. So the two teams, effectively, what England did was because as you said, Stokes isn't bowling, so they fiddled with the balance of their side a little bit. They took out a batsman, namely Zach Crawley at number 3, and added an extra bowler. So they kind of, Archer, Broad and Anderson were all available, and we were last week kind of wrangling over, who'd you keep in, who'd you keep out? And they kind of went, well, we don't have to decide that now. We'll just put all 3 in. And they kept 4 seamers and a spinner.
Yeah.
Obviously, no Stokes as a 5th seamer. He obviously usually playing the role of the 4th seamer. So they went with Burns, Sibley, Root at 3, Stokes, Pope, Buttler, Wokes, Bess, Archer, Broad and Anderson.
So they brought in Archer as another.
They brought in Archer, they brought in Anderson, and they took out Curran and Crawley, which was an interesting decision. And then the West Indies also did something we didn't expect, in that we thought they'd rest Shannon Gabriel because he was seemingly, and judging by his performance on the first day and how he looked on the first day, still is looking quite tired and hurt. And so they took out Alzari Joseph and brought in Raheem the Dream. Other than that, they were pretty much unchanged, I believe. So it was a bit of an odd one, really.
I don't understand at all. I really don't understand it at all. And especially more so in the West Indies case, that Shannon Gabriel is obviously injured. That there is an injury there that is really plaguing him and affecting his game. Give him a test to rest. You know what? Why risk further damage or further injury to him by playing him? And also, you know, Alzarri Joseph is a brilliant bowler as well. He needs that experience, yeah, but that's because he's a young bowler. If you give him the time and you give him the opportunities, even in a test that's as important as this test is, he'll be able to make it work. So I don't understand why Shannon Gabriel is playing in this game. Not because of any fault of his own, just because he needs a rest. You know, the guy is brilliant, but he's worked his socks off for this West Indies team, and he just needs a rest. And they said there was a very interesting bit in the commentary yesterday where it was pointed out that he was still sprinting to and from the boundary. You know, if there were any wayward deliveries, or if there are any deliveries that, because he fields quite far out as well on the boundary, and he's been sprinting back and forth. And it was like, and the point was made that why not as a team, you know, go to him and say, you don't worry about those, we'll pick them up. You know, you just have to focus on bowling. Because he's just been worked way too hard at this point.
My understanding of it is that Gabriel doesn't actually have a kind of official injury. He's not injured. He's just kind of very sore and stiff because he's been playing back-to-back test matches. So yeah, I'm not sure why he's playing. I think they should have rested him, but I don't know if they felt they could, because Alzarri Joseph, I don't think he was rested based on performance. There was talk of him having a triceps injury, so
Yeah.
he may have been forced out, which meant they kind of had to keep Gabriel in.
Yeah.
The only alternative really was bringing in someone like Kemar Holder, who is exciting and talented,
But inexperienced.
but never played Test cricket before, and this is a game that decides whether the West Indies take their first series win in England since 1988. So I think they kind of felt that they had to keep Gabriel in.
Yeah.
I think the inclusion of two spinners, Roston Chase as an all-rounder and then Rakeem as a specialist, is intended to try and help Gabriel particularly, in that you can kind of stick a spinner on one end and then just rotate your three seamers up the other end, except when the new ball comes on and so on. So I think that was intended to help Gabriel, but it's not really worked, because first of all, when he's bowling, he's not looking accurate, he's not looking good, still a lot of big wides. He's making life very difficult for Shane Dowrich, who's already down on his confidence and is dropping a lot. And then they all look pretty tired. Actually, Kemar Roach looks the least tired, but Holder looks tired, Gabriel looks tired. And
I suppose for them, the thing to remember is that it's not just the fact that they've played 3 games back to back. It's also that they've come so far, and that they have been together and been as a team, you know, in isolation since mid-May or the start of June or something. Yeah, since the start of June. So it's been almost 2 months that they've been in isolation now, and it's a huge amount of time. It's basically like a very, very long overseas tour, and so I suppose that fatigue, that exhaustion is going to be there, and especially, I mean, it's going to be magnified by the fact that they can't, you can't get out, and in a normal overseas tour, in a normal sort of series, they'd at least be able to go away from the ground between games, and they'd be able to relax a bit. But there's nothing here. It's just been in the same bubble, and it is going to have an effect at some point.
The problem with the selection is that it's hampering the team to keep people like Gabriel in, because first of all, he's giving away extras on huge wides and stuff, and also you can see the England players targeting specifically him when he's in the field. They will nick a quick single off him because he can't be as dynamic in the field for risk of injury. In fact, there was a 4, which would have been I think it would have been 1 or 2 runs, but
he
it
didn't
went for
play
4
for it.
because he didn't feel like he could dive or bend down because he might pull his hamstring. So he kind of went for it with his foot and he missed it, and
Yeah,
he's clearly just too stiff to field effectively.
yeah,
But it's the problem with the West Indies not having as much strength in depth in the bowling as England do. I think it influenced Holder's decision at the toss because his logic was clearly, if he'd batted first, he could have hoped that he'd given his bowlers a couple of extra days rest. But I think he felt that his batting lineup was too fragile and the conditions were too bowler friendly.
yeah,
That actually what might have happened is that they'd got out cheaply, then the batting conditions had changed, and his bowlers would actually end up out there for longer. So the idea was to put England in, bowl them out quickly and cheaply, and then bat for a bit and let his bowlers rest.
yeah,
So that was a good decision, but it hasn't really gone that way. And then when England come to bowl, what we see now is you've got Broad, who's coming off a hot streak on the last game. Same with Wokes, who loves it in England. Then you have Jofra coming back in fresh at his top pace on a helpful surface to pace. And Jimmy bowling from his own end of the ground, the Jimmy Anderson end, where he takes wickets at 12 apiece, having been rested in the last game, coming in fresh. And so I'm expecting a really good bowling performance from England.
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely, and I suppose it's one of those things that on the surface you think, what, you do question the decisions that the West Indies selectors have made, but you dig a bit further and you realise that there are reasons why they've done it, but also there's that context of them having this extremely long tour, all the sort of the exceptional circumstances around it. It is just having an effect. And I think that there will be, even if they don't win this, even if they don't win this test and take the series away, there will be a huge sense of relief when the test finishes, because it's that sort of, I suppose with them, it's that milestone that they've reached the end of this test series, and that's it. And they can go back and rest now, which is really needed for as we said, for Shannon Gabriel, but also for a lot of their other players. It's really, really needed.
I don't mind England's selection that much, though. I was slightly mystified when it.
I found it. I had a few gripes. Firstly, Zach Crawley, in that he was the hero of. Obviously, England didn't win, but he was, one of the England heroes of that first test. He made his 72 or something like that. And he was really hailed as, we've got a really solid number 3 now. And obviously you had then Burns and Sibley trying to the top of the order, so they were seen as a good top 3. But I just think that he's suffered a bit for the need for extra bowlers, because he's lost his place through no fault of his own, really. And I do feel for him. But the other gripe I have is Chris Wokes instead of Sam Curran. I would love to see Curran playing, because he makes things happen, and he's, like I said in the last episode, he really does. He makes a ball do something when it's not doing much for anyone else, and he really put the game and set up these key moments. But also he did very well in the last test, and he gave a very good account of himself, and he can also bat. And Chris Wokes can bat as well. But I'd love to see Curran instead of Wokes. No fault of Chris Wokes there, because he's a brilliant player as well. But I just think Curran would give you something different here.
I slightly disagree with you. So I was slightly mystified when the selection first came out. I was kind of like, why are they fiddled with the balance of their side in that way? It then came out that Stokes has a quad strain. He's not going to be bowling much, if at all. And so that's why they needed the extra bowlers. In terms of then who got taken out of the team, yes, it's harsh on Zach Crawley, but if you think back to the last game, he got a duck in that first innings, and England still batted long and made 450 or odd.
Yeah.
So he can. you could, with the batting lineup that they had, you could kind of afford to lose him, especially when you don't need to bat that long in this game because it's going to be shortened by the weather.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And also you you just don't need to bat long in this game. You have a good enough batting core at the moment on this pitch, which we've seen in the last Test match, to get a decent score without Crawley in there.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the Curran over Wokes thing, my instinct was Curran should play because he has that kind of knack of making things happen. He offers a little bit of a different angle and so on, and also he creates the footholds for Dom Bess.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of Curran playing, but actually, if you look at Chris Wokes,
yeah,
he has a better average in England than Curran, Archer, Broad, or Anderson.
Yeah.
Overseas, he's got a pretty terrible average, but in England, he plays exceptionally well, and he bowled better than Curran in the last game. So you don't really need Curran's batting as much because this is a more bowler-centric team at the moment because of the conditions and the way the game's going to be shortened. You want the best bowling attack you can give, and I think because we always debate the bowling lineup and go, it's really hard to choose. Who do you leave out?
Yeah.
If you look at this bowling lineup, I think that is England's current best bowling lineup.
Yeah, yeah.
Broad and Anderson, Archer, Wokes. In England, that is. Overseas, it would look very different.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
But here in England, I'd say that's their best lineup. And that's what they're hoping for. They're kind of playing the West Indies at their own game and saying, well, even without Crawley, we're a bit better at batting than you are. And now we're going to out-bowl you because you rely so heavily on your bowling attack and your bowling attack's knackered. So we're going to out-bowl you as well. And that's how we'll win this game. Because ultimately, with a shortened game like this, England don't need that many runs to win it. They need 20 wickets. And that's what this side is geared to do, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think, they're taking the fight to the West Indies now, as you said. It is a formidable bowling attack. And Chris Wokes is a brilliant player as well, just to clarify. And I think it's going to be great to see what they can do, especially after coming back, after everything that's happened. It'll be great for him to just show what he can do and just, I think, silence a few people as well off the field. And because there's been certain things about Archer and his situation. But it would be good for him to give a response on the field, and then Broad and Anderson, seeing them bowl together, that partnership back, that would be pretty brilliant. And I think they figured out how to use Dom Bess as well. That's another key thing. I think they've figured out how to use him, and they figured out what they did wrong, in the earlier parts of the last Test and in the first Test, and so now I think they'll really be able to utilize him the best. It's going to be great to see what he can do and see him take a few more wickets, because he took a few key ones in the last Test. He took this wicket and he took last again. But it would be great to see him come back and say, well, now that you've figured out how to use me the best, and now you've figured out where I'm best bowling from, this is what I can do, and take a few key wickets here as well. So that would be pretty good.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. And I think this isn't a balance of the side that England are going to go with for a long time.
Oh, definitely.
But just for this game, I think it's actually a pretty good side, and hopefully it will be a good bowling performance from England. I would expect it with those guys playing.
Definitely.
And actually, obviously, if England had been scheduled for 60, then we'd probably have a slightly different perspective on it and say maybe that one extra batsman would be a bit useful. But it's kind of fallen in England's favour. And while there was a bit of a collapse, this 130-something
partnership
stand from Pope and Buttler has really got them where they need to be. And I think as I say, with the game being shortened as it will be, 300 on the board is pretty much a good score with the amount of time that's going to be taken out of the game, and they're well on for that. So
I think the only thing
they can get 300 or so up, and I mean, I'm not a tactician as such, but I wouldn't rule out a kind of a forecast-based declaration, get up to 350 and declare, and try and bowl the West Indies.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is the one thing that they have to be cautious about is they just have to recognise that they are still, if you think about it, they are still in the weaker position in that they have to win this Test match to win the series. Whereas the West Indies, I mean, if this Test is drawn, then the West Indies win the series.
Well, they draw the series, but the Wisden Trophy stays with them.
It stays with the West Indies, yeah. And obviously that will still be a big victory for the West Indies. So I think England have to be cautious that they don't bat for too long, and you know, then the rain that's forecast for day 3 and day 4, you know, that rain then doesn't hamper them and assist the West Indies in forcing out a draw. But also they need to make sure that they put enough runs on the board, that the West Indies can't, you know, don't just knock those runs off, and then set them up, you know, put them into bat on the last day and really cause them some trouble.
Yeah, so, I wouldn't say England want really to bat past tea today.
Yeah.
I think that would hamper them in terms of
I think
winning the game.
I think 300 is probably all they need. I think they reach 300, and I mean, obviously, it's different. If Buttler is on for his century and he's on like 80 or 90, then just leave him in for another 20 runs and you know, let him score that century. But I think when they get to 300, if that's not the case, then it's just a case of declaring, because the West Indies we've seen in this Test, they haven't a big score. They haven't made a score over 300 themselves. And so there's nothing to say that they will be able to do that in this Test, especially with the shortened format we're going to have.
Yeah, I think it's really one that England have to win. The West Indies aren't going to easily lose it because of just the amount of time which is likely to be taken out of the game.
Oh yeah.
I've cheekily checked, and we do at the moment have play. There's no rain at the moment. Oh, Buttler's almost been got out. Sorry, but but yeah, we do have play at the moment, but the forecast for the next couple of days is kind of on and off. We probably won't get a washout, but on-off cricket.
It's going to be. I mean, it's definitely going to be a few days which we lose a lot of overs in. So
I think tomorrow or the next day might be a washout.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and the light will always be an issue as well, because we had to end early yesterday for light. So
yeah,
it's going to be all of the conditions are not conducive really.
So England really have to kind of hurry the game along and try and win it. And you know, even if you with the bowling attack you've got, it doesn't matter if you go kind of somehow, even with the delays, you end up having a 4-day game. If you can bowl the West Indies out, that's all you need to do, and just get enough runs on the board that they don't get too far ahead of you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So game management will be key from England in this game if they want to win it. Obviously, the West Indies game management will be key for the West Indies as well. But we're talking because England have that interest and that need to win this game, and it's a lot more important for England to win than it is for the West Indies in terms of the series. Obviously, they both like to win. Game management is going to be key for England, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be what decides this game. I think Root's decisions in a declaration, in what he does with his bowling attack, in how he, you know, in how he makes time up, or you know, mitigates the effects of the lost overs, is going to be key. So that's something that I think personally is going to be what we look back on at the end of this Test as what decided the Test. And so there is, you know, Root's captaincy and the decisions he makes are going to be really, I mean, they're not going to be scrutinised, but there will be, there is going to be a lot of stock put into them. So yeah.
Based on, I am watching the action just behind the Zoom. Based on what I've just seen, something I want to talk about in the next show. We don't really have time today, but something I want to talk about in the next show is Shannon Gabriel has just bowled a massive no ball and it's not been called. And I want to talk about how stupid the usage of technology in calling no balls is. So we need to talk about that in the next episode, which will be recorded tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. Right. The one thing that I want to do before, obviously, we do our bits to finish. Wisden yesterday had a article up on the best and the worst pieces of cricket commentary in history. So there's a guy obviously talking about, he was listing out his five favorite pieces of commentary and his 5 worst. It was a really interesting list. There's some of the bits in the dislike column really surprised me, because he said that Nasser Hussain's reaction to Ben Stokes' catch against South Africa in the first game of the World Cup. He said you cannot do that and all that. He said he didn't like that, and I was like, what?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and this, and I don't know who the author was, but we shan't name him, just but no, he didn't like that. I don't know why, but yeah, that really surprised me. But then some of the bits in the good column were things that I thought, pretty good. So Richie Benoit made appearances there. Obviously the voice of cricket in the 80s, really. And then he had some of the some of the World Cup reactions as well. Some of the commentary to World Cup games, he said, he found really good. So there were bits that I found he really, that were hits, and there were bits where I thought, you've missed the mark on that one. But I wanted to ask then, what are our favourite pieces of cricket commentary?
I'm not sure I have particular moments. Obviously, there are famous ones like Ian Smith on the World Cup, by the barest of margins. The Nasser Hussain thing, you cannot do that, Ben Stokes. Pretty much anything by Nasser Hussain is I'm a big fan of his. Pope's just been dropped by Cornwall on 91.
Oof.
We just talked about how good a slip field. Well, there's a lot of talk about how good a slip fielder Cornwall is, and he's just been dropped. Absolute sitter. Anyway, sorry. I like Nasser Hussain's commentary. I think just in general, David Gower was my favourite commentator on Sky Sports. He was as mercurial a commentator as he was a player, kind of quite old-fashioned. He always had that quite received pronunciation kind of voice. I really liked him. I thought he was old school, and he provided insight from a wealth of cricketing knowledge, and I really enjoyed it, especially when he was paired with Ian Botham. I really liked that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do have favourite pieces. Obviously, you said Ian Smith last year, by the barest of margins, is brilliant. But also not just that last bit of the end of the Super Over, but sort of his whole commentary spell before that. The whole of the last few overs, especially when there's that deflection of Ben Stokes' bat for 6. That was his reaction there, because I think he loses his breath. He becomes speechless at what's just happened. Yeah. So that was brilliant.
There is footage of it as well, and he's kind of banging his elbows on the desk, and like his head's in his hand. It's really. So the commentary on that World Cup final was spectacular and really added to it.
Really is, yeah. And I do have to say that there's actually, he wasn't actually meant to be. He shouldn't have actually been commentating that bit, because what they usually do is the commentator they bring in for the end, especially for knockout games in the World Cup, the commentator they bring in at the end is one from the country who they think is going to win. So obviously they can announce that country has won. So it should have been Nasser Hussain, actually.
But they had no idea who was going to win.
Yeah, no, that's it. So they actually thought, they were so convinced at one point, when his commentary spell was going to start, that New Zealand were going to win. Said got there and announced that they've won. So he went up, and obviously then he has to announce this whole Super over. But what it's done is given us this iconic piece of commentary,
Yeah.
which is really good.
One of the all-time most iconic, I think,
Oh, definitely. You listen back to it even today, and it still gives you chills. You listen to it.
Well, as an England fan, as a New Zealand fan, you probably break out in a cold sweat.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So let's finish with our traditional bits of star player, moment of the day, and word to describe the day.
Star player for the West Indies, probably Kemar Roach. I believe he had the best bowling performance. His wicket of Ben Stokes was excellent. He bowls really well, and he's bowling better and better as the series goes on. Star player for England, I refuse to give it to Joss Buttler, not because I don't like him, but because that'll make me even more of an idiot. But I think Ollie Pope deserves it. He started this morning on 91, been dropped on 91 by Rakeem the Dream, who is now Rakeem the West Indian Nightmare. But he's a very good player, and the mini, well, not so mini, he's probably taller than him, but the new Ian Bell, as he's being referred to, and he's very good. So I think star player for England has to be Pope. Hopefully he'll get his century today. And then, see, my kiss of death didn't work. He was dropped.
Yeah, I've just seen the text commentary about that.
Have you seen the catch?
I haven't seen the video yet, but they haven't put it up yet.
It's a sitter, and he's dropped it.
Oh,
anyway,
some of us don't have Sky. That's the oh
well. moment of the day. Probably actually when Rakeem Cornwall came on to bowl for the first time. It's his first test in England. Pope has just gone.
Oh,
my kiss of death has worked. He's just gone on 91.
Oh dear. That is
LBW, I believe. But yes, real shame that. But Rakeem coming on, that was interesting. Yeah. He's bowled him. Shane Gabriel bowls Ollie Pope on 91. There you go. Little spoiler for you.
There you go.
But
we'll discuss tomorrow. But you've heard our live coverage as well.
excellent to see Rakeem Cornwall get a go. We wanted him to get a go, and he's a bit of a spectacle. So that's nice. And word of the day. Seesaw. There you go. Seesaw. It went, it went up and down. It went back and forth, and it really did seesaw between the two teams. So we'll see how it goes today.
Nice. That's a very interesting word of the day. My star player for England is going to be Joss Buttler, just because he's proven you wrong. But also, it's just nice to see him now make a score, and all that pressure. The pressure won't be lifted, but you can tell that it's going to have a huge effect on his confidence, and he will, it's going to give him the confidence now to think, well, Test cricket actually, I can thrive in Test cricket. It's just I need to get the basics right. I need to get my mentality right, and this is going to help. It's going to go a long way to helping him do that. So yeah, Joss Buttler for the West Indies. Rakeem Cornwall has to be, just because that catch that he made. Obviously, he dropped one just now. But that catch that he made yesterday was spectacular, and also just he's such a idiosyncratic player. It's just brilliant. But yeah, so Rakeem Cornwall, moment of the day, I would say, is when Kemar Roach bowled Ben Stokes, just because of the sheer sort of shock for that moment on England fans. Well, not just England fans, but everyone, because it's a testament to how good Ben Stokes is now, that every time he goes into bat, you almost feel like, well, he's going to be there for a while. And obviously he got bowled on 20 yesterday, and it's just that sort of reminder that he can't do it every day. He can't do it every day. The rest of the team needs to come and help. And really the rest of the team, Buttler and Pope especially, did help yesterday and did contribute. And then my word to describe the day adaptable. And the reason I say that is because both teams had to adapt, and not just to the day. I think they'll have to adapt to the rest of the series as well. But definitely to yesterday, they both had to adapt. That's my word to describe the day.
Excellent.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And I think that is all from us today. And we will see you all again for our analysis of day 2. And we'll let you know what's happening and give our sort of takes on what's gone on in the day. But yes, thank you for listening, and thank you for giving us your time. And also remember to donate to the Ruth Strauss Foundation, please. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.